Life Rhythms with Ryan Skyy. Observing the world around me, looking inward, trying to make sense of it all. Hello, my inner explorers. Welcome to Life Rhythms. I'm your host, Ryan Skyy. Life Rhythms, it's a radio show and podcast. It's about my personal growth journey. As a DJ and producer, I spent a lot of my time observing the world around me, looking inward, trying to make sense of it all. I've been doing it up until this point in song form, and now I do it on the radio show. Every episode of Life Rhythms, we feature one guest and one song, and I choose a personal growth topic around the song as like a jumping off point to talk with the guest. I'm really excited this week. I've got the Canadian electronic duo Bob Moses, specifically Tom and Jimmy from Bob Moses are going to be joining me, and we're going to be featuring their single called Hanging On from their album, The Silence in Between. And what we're going to talk about today is the human spirit. We're going to talk about why is it that it seems like it's a prerequisite for somebody, for us to grow and evolve, for us to experience adversity and challenges. It's almost like through obstacles, this serves as a vehicle for us to reach our full potential in life. So we're going to talk about their experience coming up as artists from starting out in that long journey, climbing up the mountain to where they are now, which is they were nominated for a Grammy. Their song Tearing Me Up won a Grammy for the remixed version of it by RAC. They've toured all over the world. They've played Coachella. They've played all over, and they're revered. Their live show's revered, but they went through the same kind of experience that artists go through, the same kinds of uncertainties and questions and having to figure out the process of what is it like being in the world? What's it like being an artist? How do I navigate an industry and navigate these dreams and goals that aren't so clear cut? It's not like you can, like a doctor, you go to school, you specialize in a certain field, and then there's a process, but there's no clear path in as a musician. I'm excited to talk to them about their experience. We're going to have them on. We're going to take a short break. And when we come back, I'm going to be joined with Tom and Jimmy from Bob Moses right after this on Adobe Radio. Welcome back to Life Rhythms Radio Show. I'm your host, Ryan Skyy. I've got my guest with me today, Bob Moses. I'm joined with the electronic duo Tom Howie and Jimmy Vallance from Bob Moses. Hey, guys.
Hey, man. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's good to have you on the show. We just played a little snippet of the song we're featuring today, Hanging On, from your new album, The Silence in Between. And you just released a remix of it, right? The Cree remix just came out. And yes. I'm excited to talk about this topic today. So I was looking at the lyrics, and specifically the lyric, felt like nothing's coming my way for so long, but I'm still hanging on. So I was looking at that lyric, and I was thinking to myself, I immediately thought about the human spirit, how interesting it is to me. Like, what is it about the human spirit that we are faced with adversity, challenges, and we still find hope? It's like almost like a vehicle for growth. It's almost as if the challenges and the adversity is necessary in order for us to grow as humans. And I wanted to talk to you about that today because I'm curious. Like, you guys, you're both from Vancouver and you moved to New York. You had started the group in New York. And I'm wondering, how did you get from moving to New York, just starting out, to where you're at right now, which is, like nominated for a Grammy, having won the Grammy for the Tearing Me Up remix and touring and being celebrated all over the world? Like, that is such a journey, you guys. I imagine you must have faced adversity. What was that like, moving to New York and starting out?
I mean, I think the thing that that song in particular has in common with sort of our career path and maybe just being a musician in general is that song was written during the pandemic, like when everything was locked down, and then also after the tragic passing of George Floyd, when everyone was rioting and there was just this uncertainty in the world of, it feels like everything around us is sort of going crazy, and there's all these things out of your control. Are we going to be able to have a career? Are we going to be able to continue? What's going on? And you realize that with uncertainty, and uncertainty is something that has sort of like, for lack of a better word, plagued Tom and I since wanting to be musicians. So it's like, is it going to work out? Is this going to be our career path? How do we make this work? And there's a lot of things in the world that you can't control. Most things you can't control. but you can control how much effort you put into what you're doing and sort of how hard you work, and like what, just focus on yourself and improve yourself. And that, the message of the song that's in there, sort of just keep on hanging on and hold on to what you do have, because that's what will give you hope. And we've sort of always been like that about music and have found that within ourselves. And so we kind of knew in Vancouver, it's going to be very difficult to make it. And sure, moving to America and moving to New York is a huge risk, but you kind of got to bet on yourself. And sort of that's something that we could control, was betting on ourselves. And it ended up panning out, but it wasn't without this immense amount of fear of, oh shit, have we really made a mistake,
Yeah. So has your relationship with uncertainty changed from when you first started out to now?
Yeah, mine has. I mean, I'm just a lot less worried about it now, I'm more comfortable with it. Not all the time, but I think that like I've personally just developed a bunch more strategies for dealing with it. And I've also just accepted that it's a part of life, like I think I used to sort of always try to figure out what the answer, like there's got to be some answer. There's got to be like a one size fits all solution to this problem. And with age and also like experience, I've kind of learned that you just have to, like, uncertainty is guaranteed. It's one of the only certainties in life. Uncertainty is one of the only certainties in life, which is a funny thing to say, but and so you just have to try and like focus on the moment and be present and do the next best thing, do the next obvious step, and stay positive and keep hope. And like, you can you're a lot more resilient than you think. I think that a lot of us, especially, if you come from a comfortable upbringing, or or you haven't, I mean, I don't know. I think it's more to do with your personality, perhaps, like how much adversity or how much chaos you can handle. But I think that we're all a lot more resilient than we think. And for me, it's just kind of been about, the bits of success that we have definitely sort of calmed my worry about uncertainty. But I would say that like uncertainty has in my life been one of my biggest fears. And it's kind of interesting that my sort of internal battle has been the pull between knowing that I was a musician, whether I wanted to be or not, like I can't turn it off. And so therefore knowing I had to give it a shot as a career, but also it being one of the most uncertain careers you could choose. And so that for me has caused a lot of distress. But as I've gotten older and we've had some success, I've just learned to trust myself. And, if you get enough evidence for that, you can, like, if you just work hard, you can do it, so you might start to believe it a bit.
Yeah, that is true. So I'm curious, what separates, why do some people want to become an artist, get into the industry, and they're able to take all of those steps and climb up the mountain over years and years and years, facing all of the uncertainty, all of the challenges that come their way, and they're able to move through the way you guys have, and then other people get stuck?
That it's really tough. Everyone's sort of on a different path, and some people get stuck and then they sort of find themselves again and have a sort of a resurgence or a rebirth. Other people get stuck and it doesn't work out. I mean, I think one of the things is that, a lot of people say this, but I think it takes actually going through it to realize what it means. Is like, you got to be in it for the right reasons.
Yeah.
If you want to do it for money and fame, there's easier things. There's easier ways to make money. There's easier ways to be famous. But you really have to love making music. You have to do it for the love of it. And when Tom and I were coming up, Napster had just completely sort of crushed the music industry. And people were saying, oh, there's no money in it anymore. And it was, touring isn't what it is now, like in the late 2000s. And, Spotify obviously didn't exist. Social media didn't really exist. And so we did it because, sort of like what Tom was saying earlier, it's what we had to do.
Yeah.
We loved making music so much that we would do it. Even if we were both working 9-to-5s now, we would still do music. And so that draw to it, because we loved making it so much, and love the craft, doing it every day, you get good to a point where it can become your career. And then those other things will follow. But I genuinely believe if you do it for any other reason than loving the craft and trying to get better at, be better tomorrow than you were today at what you're doing, it can all fall apart very easily if you get caught in the other stuff.
Yeah, that's true. I can relate to this. It's almost like for me, it kind of felt like a curse. It's like, because I loved making music and being in music so much like you, I felt like I had no other choice. It's like, I have to do this.
Totally.
Have there been moments along the way where either of you felt like quitting, or maybe felt like it was time to move on to something else? And this is why I'm asking, is because from my own experience, last year I was touring, I was on the road every weekend, and it was starting to wear on me. I was starting to feel like burned out from it. And I was getting to the point where I kind of had to admit to myself and realize that like the way I was feeling was not sustainable. Like I didn't feel like I could sustain the energy wise of what needed to happen. So I genuinely was like, well, maybe I considered moving on and doing something else. Cause I was like, well, I can't, I don't want to feel like this. I don't know if I can, if this is going to work. And so I took some time to consider other options, other paths. And through that exercise of it, considering other options, it reignited my love for the music. And I realized I couldn't walk away, that I would actually have deep regret if I did. And also I realized maybe it was just a biology issue. Like it's just energy. Like what if I just go all in on my biology and focus on like the supplements that I'm taking, on the sleep and the food that I'm eating? Maybe if I do have the energy, it would change. And so I went all in for like 3 to 6 months and took all these supplements, and it totally changed everything. I had the energy and the vitality again, and I was able to tour. I didn't feel stressed and burn out anymore. And so I've been able to stick with it. So I'm curious, like, have you guys had those moments where you've kind of had to like renew your commitment to the project?
Yes and no. I mean, like I always considered, what else I would do, or I still think like, I still think,
Yeah.
I still have days where I'm like, we haven't made it to the level I want to make it to. And like, am I going to have to do something else? You know what I mean? Like, which is sort of ridiculous to think about, but I think, and that's more of a fear thing. I think that we can definitely get burned out. I'd say that we were both, we were both burned out after last year. We just toured like insanity, the busiest we've ever toured. I remember texting Jimmy like in August, like before we had to go, like we still had tons left to do that year. Like we still went down to South America once or twice, and we had a whole Europe tour to do, and we both, and being like, I literally feel like I have all the symptoms of burnout right now.
Yeah.
And I think, I think that, like you said, you just have to find a way to take care of yourself when you can, I think, and it's sort of like being an athlete in that way. Touring is a very specific thing. It's sort of like being an athlete, that you have to be very disciplined in in the methods, in being true to yourself, and like giving yourself those things you need to be able to like recover and be in a good headspace and recuperate. I think that's very important. And especially if you want to like do it for a longer period of time than, a short amount of time. When we first started, we were in our early to mid 20s, and like we could just party all the time and like not get any sleep and sleep in. And like I could do 3 shows in a weekend and party my face off the whole time and sleep on the flight only, and like get home on Sunday night and like sleep for 14 hours and like be in the studio on Monday afternoon. And that was no problem. But then like, I can't do that anymore. So it's like, you just have to learn as you go, and just like listen to yourself and like do the things you talked about. Like make sure that you're always like approaching it from like a balanced place, take care of yourself first.
And what about setting boundaries? Have you had to learn to set boundaries and kind of protect yourself in the project? Like when I DJ and people were like, you don't want to drink? You don't drink? And I'm like, well, I'm not opposed to drinking, but no, I don't drink. You can't do 100, 200, however many shows a year and be drinking every single time. It's not sustainable. So for me, I had to learn boundaries. Is that something you guys have had to learn?
Definitely. I think that comes with the territory. I think there's a place, because at the beginning, it's like, especially with dance music, it's so rooted in the party scene that you're basically going out to party to have fun. You're also inspired by the music and love the scene that's going on and getting involved. And then you start to play the parties, but there's still space for recovery. And then it becomes every night. And every night is someone else's Friday, you know?
Yes.
So you can easily find yourself, and, you know, on your rider is enough alcohol to, you know, just go completely nuts. And that's showing up every night. So and for some reason, being a musician is one of the only industries where people basically like almost want you to be messed up. It's like kind of like they want you to be the rock star that they can't be.
Yeah.
Or something, you know? And any other job you show up like that, you're going to get fired. But a musician, it's almost like celebrated. So you definitely have to learn how to pace yourself and when to say no. And the thing is that we both love the music more than anything. And we feel so lucky to be doing what we're doing that we've realized that anything that could potentially jeopardize it is just not worth it. You know? So we definitely don't do like Tom sober and I pick my battles when I drink, you know, it's rare.
Yeah, I stopped drinking like 4 years ago, and that just like totally changed the game for me, you know?
What brought you to the point that you wanted to quit?
Just like too much, man. Just too much, you know? It was diminishing returns, you know? Like I knew that I was not, like you said, it was at the point where like, you know, I did, you know, I'd just take 3 months off and then drink again. And then I did another 2 months off, and I just like, I always felt so good. And it just got to the point where I knew that if I wanted to continue to like do this long term, and also if I wanted to like have a life outside of just being on the road all the time, I needed to just like stop drinking and confront the things, not only in my personal life, but also in my music life and on my like, you know, like I definitely used booze and drugs as a crutch. Like if I was super tired, I didn't feel like going on stage or didn't feel like performing, or I, like, you know, you're at some big show and you like have to be this, you feel like you have to rise to the occasion and be this big personality. I would like use alcohol as a crutch for that, and drugs. And like, I realized that if I wanted to continue to do it, I needed to be able to get there without drugs and booze. And it was surprisingly way easier for me than I thought it would be to get there. And also now, as soon as I got there, I'm like actually way better at it. And I got way better at it, and I enjoy it more. And you know what I mean? So it's kind of like, it was just something I had to do. And I think that overcoming all the things that I was using booze and drugs to dull or numb or avoid has made me way stronger in my personal life and also in like my professional music life as a result, you know?
Did you feel like you had to relearn how to be on stage, be live, perform whenever you were sober, because you now were doing it in a different state?
No, not really. I mean, like I always say to people, like, you know, if you have friends come backstage, or like, you know, I recently, in the last few shows I've had like friends from high school that I haven't seen like 10 years come just because we're in their city or whatever. And they say, you know, somebody who's not in the business says like, do you get nervous? And I always say like, I'm more comfortable like on stage. I'm about as comfortable on stage as I am like in my bathrobe in the morning drinking coffee, or like going to the bathroom, or, you know what I mean? Like, it's like we've done it so much that I'm like pretty comfortable up there.
Was it always like that though? Were you that comfortable in the beginning?
No, not in the beginning, but I think that the point at which I got over the alcohol and drugs thing, I'd done it enough and I was comfortable enough. The first few times, you know, were hard, but like it pretty quickly became easy. Like I sort of realized like, oh, I wish I'd done this sooner, because it's not, I didn't feel like I needed the booze as much as I even thought I did, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't feel like I had to relearn. I think I just had to sort of reconnect with something that was very innate in me already, and reconnect in a more conscious way, like a more as opposed to a sort of fumbling around way. But
more intentional.
Yeah.
Would either of you say you're an introvert or an extrovert?
I'm 50-50.
Yeah.
I can definitely go out there and be an extrovert, but then I also really like my time alone, huddled away. Like that's the thing about this job too, is that it sort of requires both. There's the guy on stage that's performing, and then there's the guys who lock themselves away in the studio and sort of twiddle with the knobs and come up with new songs. Like, and
introspective.
I always found it such a crazy like juxtaposition, the two roles of like being in your bedroom when you're starting out making music and no one kind of cares, and then all of a sudden you're on a stage in front of thousands of people with people that now know your music.
Yeah.
Like nothing will prepare you for that, you know? And some people have a really hard time dealing with it and other people don't. It's like I think it's a personality thing, but it really is like, that's also one of the amazing things about this job, is that the two sides of it are so different. If you get burned out on the road, you just go back in the studio for 4 or 5 months and, you know, you sort of can get a fresh wind, write some new songs. And then you're kind of, you know, you want to get back on the road. It's like the double curse. It's like when you spend too much time on the road, you want to go home, and you spend too much time at home, you want to go back out on the road.
Yeah.
So I think it's good, you know, and we both do well with balancing both of those things, but I know it's hard for some people.
How do you talk yourself through each of those stages where you had started out making music just for yourselves and you're showing it to some people in the industry? Maybe you get a record signed, it gets released, you get asked to do your first show, you show up to do the show, and then you get faced with each moment is unique. And like you were saying, it can be challenging. It can be a little daunting. How do you talk yourself through each moment whenever you feel like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening, or we've reached this new stage?
I don't know, man. That's a good question.
Like, is it a lot of like control of your inner stories and meaning that you're placing to things?
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, it kind of like, it's sort of weird because it doesn't really feel real in a sense. And like, I think that like, I personally deal a lot with sort of imposter syndrome. Like, I sort of feel like, you know, because there's like the big moments are such like a flash, you know, it's like like we sold out the Greek theater, we play the Greek theater, it's this amazing show on, and it's just like feels like a dream I had. But like, I'm very well versed in like sitting in this room in my house with speakers and gear and like feeling like, will I ever write a good idea again? Because I've been having that feeling since I was like 8 years old, you know? So like, that feels normal to me. And the big moments on stage or the big this or whatever doesn't feel. And then the other weird thing is that like, whenever you do achieve those things, whenever you achieve some new milestone, it kind of like, it feels way more normal than it did when you were thinking about it, having not yet achieved it. You know, it's like, it feels like, oh, one day I'm going to sell this venue out, or one day we're going to like get nominated for a Grammy, or one day we're going to do this, or one day we're going to meet this person. And then you do it. And it's like, you're kind of excited because you're like, oh my God, I've thought about this and it's happening. And then it happens. And then it's just kind of a quick thing. And then it's like, oh yeah, that happened. Oh, okay. Yeah. And nothing, I don't feel much different. I just feel like the same dude who's in my room thinking, can I write a good song again or not? You know, was that all just like luck? Did I just get lucky once or twice? And like, you know, so to be honest, the best thing to do is to just not think about it and to just try and enjoy each moment and like have faith that like you can, you know, more good stuff will continue to happen if you just keep working hard and you do everything from a very honest place. You know, because you can't, like Jimmy said, you can't really control other people. You can't control circumstances.
Yeah.
All you can control is like how you approach things, how you behave in each moment, how you interact with other people, the honesty and the commitment you put into making your music, and the rest is kind of out of your control, you know?
Yeah. It's back to that point that I made about you got to enjoy the craft, because after the roar of the crowd ends, or after the award ceremony ends, you're like Tom said, you're back in your room with silence as your canvas, and you got to write another song. Yeah. And if you don't enjoy doing that, because that's what it is at the end of the day, everything else is sort of just fanfare, but it's about you with your keyboard, your guitar, sitting down, writing songs. And if you have that to ground you, I feel like that you can get longevity, you know?
Yeah. This reminds me of Rick Rubin quote. I've been reading his new book. Have you guys seen it? Have you checked it out yet? Are you reading it?
We're both reading it. Yeah.
Got it right
here. Woo! Creative act, right? A way of being. Yeah. So this reminds me of a Rick Rubin quote. He says, "We tend to think of the artist's work as the output, but the real work of the artist is a way of being in the world."
100%.
What you're saying, I think about this quote that it's the artist's job is mainly about a way of being, whether the accolades come or don't come, whether the concert sells out or doesn't sell out. When it's time to write that new song, it's kind of like, so did you guys know that from the beginning? Did you have to learn that over time? Like how are you in the world? That's what I'm wondering. It's like, how, okay.
I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
I think on the Rick Rubin book point, reading the book is helping me to be like, oh yeah, I'm an artist. You know, like, because I kind of think like, oh, it's an interesting reminder, you know. I would say, I mean, how we are in the world, I think that like we're both very, very curious people. You know, like Jimmy is this way too. Like probably Jimmy is the other most curious person I know of all my friends. Like I'm a very curious person. I'm always like learning. I love learning stuff. I'm always reading, listening to podcasts, listening to music, watching movies, like trying to understand the way the world is and how it works. And from an intellectual perspective, like in a thinking way, but also in a feeling way. And I think that like Jimmy's the other person of all the people I know who is the most like that. Like he's always, you know, he's very like, he's always got some new thing that he's telling me about or vice versa, you know? So I think curiosity is a very inherent part of being an artist, because sort of for me anyways, it feels like writing music is sort of the byproduct of my curiosity in a way. Like it's kind of like what happens, you know, I go through the world trying to figure out stuff, and then I feel like I got a song idea or I got to make something, or, you know what I mean? So I think it is a way of being in that way.
We're going to take a break, or we're done with segment number 1. We'll take a short break and we'll come back and we'll continue this conversation. Welcome back to Life Rhythms Radio Show. I'm your host, Ryan. I've got my guest today, electronic duo Bob Moses. I've got Tom and Jimmy with me. And you just heard a little snippet of their song Hanging On, which is on their album, The Silence in Between. Okay, guys, I want to share with you my first experience with Bob Moses.
Awesome.
So I took a hit of acid, and I'm on my way to see Rufus Du Sol. I'm with my friends. I didn't know who Bob Moses was. I was there going to see Rufus. At the time, I didn't know Bob Moses. And that was not a reflection of where you guys were at in your career. This was, you guys already were nominated for a Grammy. You're the remix won a Grammy. So I was late to the party, but I had not yet heard of you guys. And I showed up to the concert, took acid, and I'm like, well, who's Bob Moses? And what I noticed before you guys started was the way people were speaking about you. There was a sense of, they revered the project and the music. There was like a deep level of respect. So I was curious. And then you guys, you start your set, and you start tearing me up. And at first, tearing me up starts, you know, the boom, boom, the bass starts, and at first it's playing, and I'm like, I don't know, I don't get it yet. Like I don't get it, because it's just the bass, and it's building and building and building, and it's like a minute and a half build, and then you start right with when the vocal comes in. I was like, okay, I get it. It was really beautiful to hear it live with those. You have these like growling bass lines, these growling bass sounds in your music, and it's kind of like humming, and I love when you use arpeggios in the music. But that was my first experience, and I was a fan ever since. I thought you and Rufus, that was a really nice pairing. There's a lot of synergy between the two projects.
Totally.
Yeah. How did that come about?
I mean, we first met those guys at Coachella 2016. They were playing and we were playing, and we didn't know who they were. They were this band from Australia that was, I guess, kind of doing like, it's so crazy. Like, we think about this all the time. You think there's points in history with music where a bunch of acts from around the world kind of are doing similar stuff without even knowing about it.
Yeah.
It's just something that, like, you know, seeds get planted with. We were all listening to the same kinds of music and didn't know, and like, we were influenced by all the same sort of stuff, and then started working on, hey, what if we combine vocals with this music that we're into? They were doing it down in Australia. We were doing it in New York. And they invited us to go on tour with them in Australia just after Coachella.
Okay.
And so we went on tour with them in Australia and just hit it off, became, you know, fast friends and had a great time. And so, you know, they've invited us out to Red Rocks and to shows in LA and to, you know, like, we've done a lot of gigs with them. And it's just kind of awesome in the sense that, you know, Tom and I grew up loving like the punk scene. We love the grunge scene. We love the metal scenes. And like, we loved acts that came from scenes where there was this camaraderie about bands, sort of a sound and a time. And it feels like we've really sort of found that with acts like Rufus or HEOB, Monolink. You know, there's a lot of acts out there that are sort of, we're all inspired by each other, you know? And it's just great to have that and be able to tour with an act and have fun and share inspiration. And that's really where it started. And it's just grown since then.
That reminds me also of Rick Rubin as well. In the book, he talks about how ideas, there's moments for the idea that if it comes to you, we're kind of like an antenna. And if we don't, he noticed that like if an idea comes to him and he doesn't pursue it and help bring it out, eventually it happens somewhere else. Somebody else comes out with that idea, because it's not necessarily about you. It's about the idea, or that it's the moment for that to happen. So you were talking about how you've got Rufus on the other side of the world and you guys are in New York, and yet there's similar things happening. It's like the moment needed to, the ideas, this was the moment for those ideas to happen, for that style.
I think it's like, you know, we're all similar age. We all grew up listening to the kind of same mix of like rock and grunge music, and then we also got it into the same time into like a similar sound of like underground dance music, and we just like wanted to sort of pair both worlds in some way, and like we do it one way and they do it another way, but it's the same sort of formula, you know? I mean, I was listening to this podcast. I forget what the podcast was or like what it was about, but it was, they were talking about computers, and they said like the guy, you know, there was a bunch of people who were very qualified to talk about this, and they were saying like if it hadn't been for like these 3 or 4 major figures in the development of early computation, how long do you think it would have taken to get like the iPhone and like the computers as we have them? And the guy answered, he's like, we might have been off by a couple of years, you know? Just so it's like we put all this reverence in like the specific people who have done these things, but actually the point was that like the way that trends and movements and like ideas sort of like work their way through the world is like bigger than any individual person. And this is with technology, and I think that's kind of true in music. I think that like to the quote you mentioned about that Rick Rubin makes is sort of this, he's getting at the same point. It's like we were in New York. The world is what it is, and we're sort of coming up in similar circumstances, even though we're on the other sides of the world, with us and Rufus as an example. And like we kind of both find a similar thing and get into it in a similar way, and you know, it's just an interesting.
I'm curious, when you guys were first starting out, when I'm thinking about the timeline of electronic music, mainstream, that was around the time where what was popular was really big, like anthemic.
Yeah, EDM was the biggest thing, like
true EDM. And yet here you guys are making music that's very different.
Yeah, that was intentional, I would say. You know, like when we were starting out, I remember I was very sick, so I didn't go, but we were playing Miami Winter Music Conference, and Tom went to go see the last Swedish House Mafia concert at Ultra before they were finished. Like we were just there doing our thing, and he got invited and went. And so I would say like 2011, 12, like that was the peak. That was like, you know, Skrillex and all this was at its peak. And we were playing these underground warehouse parties in Brooklyn, and then like going to Berlin, and that scene was sort of happening everywhere. Everywhere there was like a sort of a warehouse underground scene that we got tapped into. We were able to go to San Francisco and Mexico and Europe and do all these things. So it was very small, and it was kind of like if EDM was hair metal, then what we were doing was grunge. It was like the next wave, and like totally against the wave that had came before it.
Wow. Were you excited by it, or were there, when you saw this percolating, did you have industry people at the time questioning what you were doing and maybe giving advice to try to do what was popular that you had to kind of push back on and follow your instincts? Or were they also seeing what was going on and just kind of with you from the beginning?
It took a while. Like most industry people don't clue into stuff until it's kind of obvious.
Yeah.
In our experience anyways. So I think that like we knew, like, you know, people would say, "Oh, you guys do EDM," you know, and we'd be like, "Well, not really. Like, we do electronic dance music." Yes. But like, we don't do like EDM, what you're calling it. You know, we don't do like Swedish House Mafia. Right. But like, I think that it's just sort of, I think we were always excited by the fact that it was so big. And it was so we knew that EDM becoming pop music essentially was going to do great things for all dance music and open the culture up in general to dance music as an art form, and the DJ as an artist, and the producer as an artist, as opposed to like a dude with a guitar or whatever only, you know? And I think we've always sort of been interested in musical movements, and like the analogy Jimmy just made to hair metal and grunge, we kind of like hoped that it would be like, we were like, oh, it's kind of the same. Like we were saying this back in the day before it did come to be that way, but we were kind of like, hopefully EDM is like hair metal, and now grunge, we're in the grunge scene, and hopefully the grunge scene, you know, is opened up to a bigger audience, and that works. And I think like, you know, when we first started our project, before we were even called Bob Moses, we were kind of like trying to find our way. You know, do we make more commercial sounding stuff because that's what's popular? And I think that like we just always, it comes back to that being honest thing, you know, like we made a couple tunes like in that vein, but they just kind of felt not genuine, you know? And I think that the stuff that we were making and putting out was just like sort of a bit more where our hearts were, even if we didn't know if it was like, you know, as obvious or as potentially wide reaching, you know? And I think it's just about being honest and like with yourself. And, you know, we always just try to release stuff that's, you know, if something's a bit too corny or feels a bit too like, if I look at this objectively, I see how it's like really catchy and it could be really good, but just something about it doesn't feel right, we won't put it out, you know? Okay. We'll always be like, it's got to feel.
So you've tried different ideas and styles, but then you kind of have to look in, kind of check in with yourself to see, does this feel right?
Yeah.
As like a compass.
You do it after, because you never want to get in the way of writing the idea, you know, and you get better at this as time goes on. We always like, and Tom and I can write quite a wide range of stuff. Like we can make pop music. We love the craft of songwriting, and we love pushing ourselves. And sometimes we'll collaborate with people or write songs for other people that would never be a Bob Moses songs. And we love doing that just because we love the craft of writing songs. But sometimes, you know, for Bob Moses is a very personal and I guess special project for us. And sometimes we write things that kind of go, it doesn't really quite feel genuine, or you get this feeling, you know, and you got to trust your gut, because the things that always sort of do well for you are something that feels very genuine, you're excited about. And sometimes you'll say, I have no idea if anyone's going to like this, but we like it, so who gives a shit? Yeah. And a lot of times that does well, you know? And it's funny, like you just got to trust your gut. And sometimes there's a delicate balance between like your brain and your gut. And sometimes they both line up. And when that happens, you've probably done something pretty good.
And I imagine there's times where you think something's going to do well and it doesn't, because we don't have control over the audience.
Totally.
100%.
Yeah.
The more the more we get into, like, the longer we make music professionally, the more I know that I have no fucking idea what's going to happen. And you just got to, like, it's literally like just about, you just got to show up. You got to, like, if you get an idea, like, record it in some form, work on your ideas, go into the studio, even if you don't feel like it, like, just get, like, you might have to get through 4, 5 ideas that you think are great and then end up not really being that great. And then on the 6th time, you'll get a good idea. And you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you could also write something that, like, you're super into and, like, nobody else really cares. You know, it's just, you really can't, you got to try to not get too it's hard, easier said than done, but you just got to really try to not get too attached to any idea.
It's also interesting to me when I'll make music, I'll write something or produce something and I'll be really into it and I'll think it's really good. And then I'll come back to it after some time and I'll re-listen to it and I'm like, what? This is, I feel totally different about it. Doesn't always happen like that, but that always surprises me. And it's very interesting that how that can change, our perception can change.
Totally.
Yeah, but that's the artistry of it, is like when you're making music, you're curating something that's never existed before for other people that are following you. And that's what the self-editing is you trying to be the best version of yourself for you. And then if other people like it, great. But that's not a guarantee, you know? So you kind of have to try and leave all of the expectation, like, at the door. Like I have a good friend who, loves painting, but oftentimes won't go, and they're a great painter. And they oftentimes won't go in and paint because the expectation for them to do something great when they're painting overshadows the joy of just going in and making something. So it's kind of like you just got to go in and do something and hope for the best, not to put too much expectation on yourself. Like, okay, now we got to write the best Bob Moses song that's ever been. You got to just give yourself time to be creative, give yourself the space to be creative, let the ideas that come and then judge them afterwards.
You talked about becoming your best version of yourself. This reminds me of a quote that I wrote. I always write a quote for every episode. And so the quote that I wrote for this episode goes like this: everyone should pursue difficult tasks. The pursuit of something difficult serves as a vehicle for achieving one's potential. Difficulty, adversity, and challenges, they play a significant role in shaping a person's development because it forces us to draw upon inner strength and resourcefulness, leading to increased self-esteem, confidence, and a sense of self-reliance. So
Wise words.
That's the quote. Thank you. That's the quote. But the idea is that I just believe everyone should be pursuing something difficult because in that process, you're developing as a person. You're developing your potential. You're starting to realize where your hangups are. You know, like if you have limiting beliefs or if you've got these inner stories going on that are holding you back, like you were saying your friend won't paint because of these stories about kind of like this, the stories are overpowering the ability to take action. But through that process, if your friend can work through that, they're also growing as a person because they're learning to kind of overcome those limiting issues, personality quirks, things that they have to work on. Have you guys had, what have you guys had to, how have you grown through this process, through the Bob Moses project? Like what kinds of things, if you think back to when you first started out versus now, what's changed in terms of like how you approach the way you perceive things, your relationship to, like you were saying, uncertainty?
When we first started off, I think we were really good writers and really good engineers and not great producers.
Okay.
And we've gotten a lot better at that. And what I mean is I think producing is really the tool of problem solving, figuring out solutions quickly, being confident in your decision-making, and being able to take an idea that just starts off on an acoustic guitar and turn it into something that is the essence of what it is. And we used to only be quite good at like starting with the beat and then writing a vocal over that and then, going from there. And sometimes, we would write great songs just on a piano and not really feel like we had the wherewithal to translate that into a song that felt good to us, fully produced. We would either overproduce it or underproduce it, and then it would just sit in the fridge. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so Tom and I I guess just through practice and not being afraid to climb the difficult mountains and spend days doing it. Like, oh shit, like, okay, we got this song. It's going to be a lot of work. Like, we really want it to not only sound good and feel good, but have great lyrics. And like, this is going to be like you said, you got to push yourselves.
Yeah.
And we've pushed ourselves enough times and done it together. And I think that's really the amazing thing about our partnership, or having a partnership in general, is it's almost like you're thinking out loud and not internalizing it as much as you would if you were alone. And you have someone there who, if you trust them, is sort of like a mirror back at you, showing you a different way of seeing something that you might not have before. And I think years of Tom and I doing that together has really made our songwriting, our production skills, and engineering so much better than, or at least like we can find solutions much quicker than we were when we first started. I remember having conversations at dinners when we were beginning about like a song that we were just completely stuck on and didn't know how to do. And I think now we'd be much better at solving those problems.
Did you have mentors throughout the way that have helped you kind of develop your ear, develop your taste, give advice on how to manage and grow the career?
Yes, we did. We've had Francis Harris was like a early mentor for us. Philip Young from Mandy has been a big mentor. Who else? We've had some others too. I mean, I would like to have more. I mean, we even like a big way, not so much specific mentor. Those are some specific mentors, and there's probably a few others, but that Jimmy might be able to say, but like even just circumstances like the songwriter Justin Tranter, like we did just one session with him.
Yeah.
And he told, like, we learned so much from him in just like 5 hours, you know? Like, so even just like, and we don't talk to him a lot, but like, just even like certain circumstances that you're able to find yourself in, if you like put yourself out there, you can really learn a lot, you know?
Yeah, Stuart Price was another one when we did a session with him. I remember Stuart Price is like, he's done a lot of Madonna records. He also has like, he's Thin White Duke, Jacques LeConte, like he's done a ton of underground dance stuff.
Yeah.
And so he kind of, what was exciting for us about him, and like we ended up just like talking to him a lot during the sessions. And like he comes from underground dance. It also has had massive success in pop. And we kind of straddle those lines. And we were sort of like, man, when you did the poppy stuff with Madonna, did people from the underground dance scene like call you out or shame you or anything like that? He's like, yeah, but for every one person that shamed me, I had 10 new people who would discover me and love my music. So he's like, you can't worry about what other people think about what you're doing. Yeah. You have to do it because he's like, I love Madonna. Like I grew up listening to it. And now I get to work with someone that I've idolized. This makes perfect sense for who I am as an artist. And he crushed making those records, you know?
Yeah.
And it just goes back to the whole thing of like, you can't control. You might think you can, you might think you know what other people think, but you don't, you know? And as soon as you start trying to, you know, in your head go, oh, I think other people might like this, or other people might think this about me, there's a pretty darn good chance you're wrong, you know? So you shouldn't listen to those thoughts and just go with what your heart and your gut tells you. And Stuart really, hearing someone who's had that much success say that to you was really helpful.
I'm a huge proponent of mentors and just talking to people that are further along the path that someone is wanting to go down. Because when I think of my own experience, when I was first starting out, a lot of unknown, a lot of uncertainty. But as I got to talk to people that were veterans in the industry and they had experience, they had success, it gave me hope, but it also personalized a lot of things that seemed so fantastic and fantasy and not real, like a dream. When I talked to people that achieved some of that stuff, it made it so much more real. It actually made it feel so much more possible for me. And I realized like, oh, okay, like this is doable. These things are doable. And I'm talking to someone and learning from their experience. Like, did you guys along the way, as you had these encounters with like Justin Tranter and some of these mentors, did you start to notice your mindset was changing? Maybe confidence was growing, or you kind of started to have a sense like you can do this?
Totally. Yeah. I think like it's back to that. That's sort of what I was trying to get at when I said earlier that like, you know, you think about these things and they seem fantastical and then they happen and then it's like, oh yeah. Okay. Like it just sort of feels like almost like a not a letdown, but it's almost like it's amazing for it to happen, but it doesn't feel. It feels when things that seem amazing happen to you, they sometimes feel a bit more normal than you expect them to, because before they happen to you, they seem so fantastical. And I think like that, not to say that like, it's great to achieve stuff, and it feels amazing to like achieve your dreams and stuff. But like, also I think by everything that happens is just like real real and potentially mundane to somebody, like, and I think that, having mentors and talking to people and connecting with other people who have been through stuff like that is a great way to do it. It's a great way to understand, how these things can be achieved, and the sort of mindset that goes into it. So, I mean, I think that, we sort of jump at every opportunity we can to talk with people and learn from them. And I almost wish that like we could do it more, or we had more mentors, but like,
Real quick, I wanted to ask you guys about your Falling Into Focus, your live concert that you did. We were watching the video. First of all, like that structure that you're performing on, so epic. What was that? Where was that? What was that structure?
That was an abandoned Cold War era radio tower in Topanga Canyon in LA.
Wow.
And apparently what it was built for, it had a nuclear proof bunker underneath that if there ever was an attack, that on the West Coast, that would be that thing could survive and like cast radio signals to the rest of the country. And so for us, it was like during the pandemic, like we had been locked away in a studio, hadn't played any shows. Wow. And so we almost like wanted to invent our own show to play, just to, we were rehearsing with the band. It gave us something to do. We were challenging ourselves. We wanted to sort of immortalize us playing. Like, what if this never gets to happen again? Let's just make an epic rad concert and film it and give it away for everyone to watch. And it was on that tower, and it sort of felt like us calling out to the void, like, so here, we're going to put this out. Hopefully people will listen. But man, that tower, it was dangerous. Let me tell you.
It looks dangerous. Yeah. For those of you listening, I highly recommend checking it out. It's called Falling Into Focus live concert, Bob Moses. It's on YouTube. It's like an hour-long concert. It's beautiful. It's epic. It's worth checking out. Awesome, guys. Thank you so much for joining us today, this conversation. I really loved having you guys on the show.
Thanks for having us, man. It's been great chatting with you.
Thank you.
Everyone listening, check out the single Hanging On. Check out the album, The Silence in Between. This is Bob Moses. On social medias, it's like Bob Moses Music, right?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you guys for coming on Life Rhythms, everyone. We'll see you next time.